Hi, my name's Ben Stanfield and I'm the owner and host of Total Saints podcast. Yeah, it's been a typical Saints start to the season really. I've supported the team for 34 years now. I think they've started slow in probably 34 of those seasons. It always takes them a little while to get going, normally somewhere around about November, so hopefully that's the positive of the season starting in September, that we'll get to November a little bit sooner. But a disappointing couple of defeats to start against Burnley and then Spurs, where we got beaten quite convincingly after trying to play a high line. We backed that up with 2 wins away to Burnley and at home to West Brom, keeping clean sheets, and then a really hard-fought 3-3 draw up at Chelsea last week, scoring in the 92nd minute, so it felt like a win really. But I think ultimately Saints are still trying to find their feet in the Premier League this season. Everton would of course be a tough test, but it does feel like they're going into it now with a bit of momentum and some confidence off the back of 3 games unbeaten. In terms of what went wrong against Chelsea, I think we have to be fair and understand that Chelsea are a really, really good team. They spent, £250 million this summer. Players like Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, Christian Pulisic running at us. I think it was always going to be a tough test at the Bridge. Saints tried to come out and sort of play football and not just sit back and defend deep and let Chelsea attack, and I think that potentially really caused us trouble in the first half. I think arguably Saints could have been 3 or 4-0 down at half time. It was 2-1 as we went into the break and gave Saints a real boost and a chance to get back into it. So I think ultimately those players running at us and creativity and the ability they got meant it was always going to be a tough day at the office. But the good thing about Saints these days, and the good thing that Ralph Hasenhüttl has installed in this squad, is a sort of never give up attitude. So they kept battling away, got it back to 2-2 through Che Adams' persistence, frustratingly let a goal in straight away, but kept going for the last moments of the game, getting a 92nd minute equaliser through Yannick Vestergaard, of course set up by our on loan Everton midfielder Theo Walcott. So ultimately a really, really hard-fought 3-3 draw, a really good point. I don't think you can ever turn down a point at one of the big six when you're on the road, and as I say, scoring in the last minute probably makes it feel like more of a victory than a defeat. Yeah, I think Saints had a really positive summer transfer window actually. They spent probably around about £40 to £45 million, which given the impact of coronavirus on Premier League clubs and their businesses is still a very good outlay. They managed to get rid of a few players either on loan or on free transfers that had been clogging up the wage bill and didn't look to be in Hasenhüttl's plans going forward. We strengthened all over the pitch, bringing in Kyle Walker-Peters, who'd obviously done a really good job for us at right back last season. He replaced Cedric Suarez, who's moved to Arsenal somehow on a free transfer. We brought in Mohamed Salassu from Real Valladolid, a young defender who's just taking a bit of time at the moment to get his fitness up and get ready for the Premier League. But I think the club feel that he can hopefully become one for the future and potentially have a really good resale value. And then we also signed Ibrahima Diallo in centre midfield, having lost Pierre-Emile Højbjerg to Spurs. Of course, he was linked heavily with Everton for a little while. So they look to have invested in 4 really good players. I think Theo will bring in some experience, which we'll talk about in a moment, but ultimately, both in terms of incomings and outgoings, I think it was probably a good 8 or 9 out of 10 from Saints in this transfer window. In terms of Theo himself, it was a bit of a surprising one actually. I think I wrote at the time that I was both pleased and perplexed. Pleased that he was coming back to a club that he clearly holds in his heart, but maybe perplexed that Saints was signing someone 31 years old on loan. It's not necessarily a philosophy that we've followed the last few years. It's been more about signing young players and developing them, but I don't think you can doubt that he's going to show some passion and pride to wear the shirt. He had a really good 90 minutes at Chelsea last weekend. It's a shame he can't play this weekend and keep the momentum going, but ultimately his experience should be really invaluable to a squad that is fairly young on the whole. There's a few players in there like Ryan Bertrand that have got some good big game experience, but hopefully Theo's experience on and off the pitch can add value to Ralph Hasenhüttl's side as we move forward. I think Everton have had a really good transfer window as well, bringing in players like James Rodriguez and Alan. James Rodriguez, I think for any neutral that enjoys watching football, it's hard not to be impressed by his ability, and it's great to see him playing in the Premier League, a club that spent a fair bit of money over the last few years and maybe hasn't got the recruitment quite right. For example, Saints spent a lot less and still finished a place above Everton last year, but it does finally look to have paid off this time around. Of course, it is early days in the season, so we need to probably judge it maybe at the end of the season and see how these players have done. But ultimately, I think it's been a good transfer window for Everton. And in terms of the start to the season, it's great to see Everton up there competing with the likes of Liverpool and Man City and throwing another name in the hat. Of course, as I say, it is 5 games in, so there's a long way to go. Whether Everton can keep that momentum going, we'll wait and see. But I think it's been a very positive start. Of course, they were maybe a little lucky to not lose the Merseyside derby. I think probably all of us would agree, even the most loyal of Everton fans, that Sadio Mane looked to be onside last week. But as they say in football, when you're up there, the decisions go for you, and I'm sure it was a point that no Everton fan was going to turn down, and it means that they arrive at St Mary's still unbeaten and with a lot of confidence from the start that they've made. I think Saints' goal for this season has to be to try and improve on where they finished last season. They finished 11th in the end, having had a really good sort of second half of the campaign, ironically after that massive defeat to Leicester and of course losing at home to Everton. We went on a really good run. I think if they can finish in the top 10 this season, that'll be good in terms of progression as a club, but also in terms of financial benefits of that as well, which they can hopefully then invest where they need to, given the impact, as I said earlier, of coronavirus on football teams. So I think really from a Saints point of view, it's about trying to embed some new young players in the side, the likes of Nathan Teller, who's progressed up to the first team squad this season. Can we integrate more of them into Ralph Hasenhüttl's plans? And I think really it's about trying to sort of improve our home form as well. We were 19th in the Premier League last season in terms of home form, but really, really good on the road. So I think hopefully we can pick up a few more wins at St Mary's. Predicted finish, I'm never very good at these sort of predictions, but hopefully somewhere around the region of 8th to 10th would be a good finish for Saints this season, I think. I don't see Ralph Hasenhüttl changing it much, actually, unless there's been any injuries or niggles on the training ground this week. Theo Walcott, of course, won't be able to play against Everton as his parent club, but hopefully Stuart Armstrong will be fit, having recovered from coronavirus, and that should mean that it's a like-for-like replacement on the right-hand side of midfield. Players like Ibrahima Diallo came on for a few minutes at Chelsea last week, but I would suspect that Ralph Hasenhüttl will continue with James Ward-Prowse and Oriol Romeo in midfield. So I would look at the starting lineup from last week at Chelsea, swap Stuart Armstrong for Theo Walcott, and I think, touchwood, that'll be your likely lineup for Sunday. Danny Ings is obviously the natural choice because of the form that he's been in over the last 12 to 18 months. I think he's also scored 4 times in his last 5 Saints games against Everton as well. So he has a knack of scoring against the Toffees. But I think outside of him, Stuart Armstrong is a player that's really, really creative, has had a really good season for us so far. And Nathan Redmond on the left wing as well should push forward. And hopefully, if Seamus Coleman is out, be able to sort of provide more of a threat down the left wing. Ultimately, throughout the Saints team at the moment, there's a number of players that are playing well, and I think on their day can stand up and sort of add value. But I would say that probably those 3, Danny Ings, Stuart Armstrong and Nathan Redmond, are the ones that Everton should probably look out for. Probably the best and strangest time that I've met a celebrity and or footballer was probably all in one, really. I was on a flight from Southampton up to Edinburgh a few years back and was travelling on my own and sat on my seat, and it turned out, once everyone had boarded, that Gordon Strachan, the ex-Saints manager and Manchester United Leeds midfielder, sat next to me. And obviously as a die-hard Saints fan, I knew very much who he was and the fact that he'd led us to the 2003 FA Cup final and things like that. But I didn't want to disturb him. And I happened to be reading at that time Matt Le Tizier's autobiography. And we were probably about 10 minutes in the air. And it was actually Gordon that sort of initiated the conversation by asking me about the book and said I was a Saints fan, and we had a good chat for about an hour about football and life and his time at St Mary's. He'd left the club by then. I got him to sign the book as well because there was a few pages where Le Tissier had been talking about Gordon Strachan, and it just happened to be one of those moments where you're in the right place at the right time, and it was great to talk to him about football, and clearly still very passionate about Saints and also football in general, and a very bubbly character. So it made the flight whiz by, and I think hopefully by the end of that I'd learnt 1 or 2 things about him and about Saints that I probably won't share publicly, but were very interesting to know, and a guy that I will always hold in high regard because of the job he did on the South Coast.